Thank you guys for coming out so early to this symposium of great ideas. It's going to be my duty to put what we're going to be learning today in its proper political context. Obviously there's a lot going on. Some of it is catastrophic, but some of it is very hopeful. So I wanted to start today by just showing an excerpt of Obama's speech that he gave when he went to visit Hiroshima. He was actually the first president to visit Hiroshima, and he did not apologize. So just this short excerpt, I want you to just pay attention to how what Obama thinks about humanity throughout its history.
71 years ago, on the right, flag was flown. Death fell from the sky, and the world was changed. A flash of light, a wall of fire, a swirl of silk, demonstrated that mankind possessed the means to destroy itself. Why do we come to this place? To Hiroshima. We come to ponder the terrible force unleashed in the not-so-distant past. We come to mourn the dead, including over 100,000 Japanese men, women, and children. Thousands of Koreans, a dozen Americans in prison. Their souls speak to them. They ask us to forgive them. Take stock of who we are and what we might become. It is not the fact of war that sets Hiroshima apart. Artifacts tell us that violent conflict appeared with very first man. Our early ancestors, having learned to make blades from flint and spears from wood, used these tools not just for hunting, but against their own kind. On every continent, the history of civilization is filled with war, whether driven by scarcity of grain, and hunger for gold, held by nationalist fervor or religious zeal. Empires have risen and fallen. Peoples have been subjugated and liberated. And each junkie, innocents of suffering, and countless told, the names forgotten by time. The World War that reached its brutal end in Hiroshima and Nagasaki was fought among the wealthiest and most powerful of nations. Their civilizations have given the world great cities, magnificent art. Their thinkers had advanced ideas of justice, and harmony, and truth. And yet, the Lord were under the same base instincts for domination and conquest that caused conflicts among the simplest tribes. An old pattern, amplified by new capabilities, and without new constraints. In the span of a few years, some 60 million people would die. Men, women, children, no different than us. Shot, beat, marched, bombed, jailed, starved, gassed to death, mushroom cloud that rose into these skies. We are most starkly reminded of humanity's core contradiction. Now, the very spark that marks us as a species, our thoughts, our imagination, our language, our tool-making, our ability to set ourselves apart from nature and bend it to our will. Those very things also give us the capacity for unmatched disruption. How often does material advancement go on?
So I think that gives a clear idea of what Obama thinks of humanity. And this speech comes maybe a week after he gave an interview on Japanese television before his trip, where he said that he wouldn't apologize for the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where he actually says that as himself a wartime president understands the difficult decision that Truman had to make. And he further goes on to say that he reserves the right to use nuclear weapons if he needs them. So, Obama is one of the biggest challenges we face, to put it lightly. He's a killer, he's a mass murderer, and he has his finger on the nuclear arsenal. And I think it's important for us to look at and remind ourselves how Obama became that kind of person. And it goes all the way back to his stepfather, Lolo Soetoro, whom, as many of us know, was a colonel in a, you can't call it revolutionary army, but during the coup that was ran against the Indonesian government in the mid-60s, where this army slaughtered between 500,000 and 1 million people, who they either called communists, traitors, whatnot. Most of these people didn't even defend themselves. There was just a mass slaughter, and this was when Obama was, 6 or 7 years old. And in the book about Obama, Dreams from My Father, there's an interaction there between his stepfather and Obama himself. And this is from an article that we produced last year. And here's the excerpt, so you can follow along right here. It says, "A queer notion suddenly sprang into my head." This is Obama talking to his stepfather. "Have you ever seen a man killed?" I asked him. He glanced down, surprised by the question. "Have you?" I asked again. "Yes." "Was it bloody?" "Yes." I thought for a moment. "Why was the man killed, the one you saw?" "Because he was weak." "That's all?" Lolo shrugs and rolled his pant leg back down. "That's usually enough. Men take advantage of weakness in other men. They're just like countries in that way. The strong man takes the weak man's land. He makes the weak man work in his field. If the weak man's woman is pretty, the strong man will take her." Lolo paused to take another sip of water, then asked, "Which would you rather be?" I didn't answer, and Lolo squinted up at the sky. "Better to be strong," he said finally, rising to his feet. "If you can't be strong, be clever, and make peace with someone who's strong. But always better to be strong yourself. Always." Lolo finally remarked, "Better to be strong." Now that's Obama when he's 6 years old.
And he wrote this in his book?
And that's an excerpt from his book, Dreams from My Father. And so what we're dealing with is basically a beast man in the presidency. Every Tuesday they meet with his security team, in a room in the White House, and they decide from a baseball card who they're going to kill next with a drone strike. And this has been going on since the Bush administration, but when Obama came in, he's done about 10 times more drone strikes than Bush. They've killed tens of thousands of people, and it's come out that over 90% of these people are innocent civilians. Women, children, weddings, hospitals that they've bombed. And this is a great threat to humanity, especially if we look at what's being set up right now. We are on the verge of World War III. There's a massive, massive buildup of NATO forces on the border of Russia. Right now there's war exercises going on that happen, different exercises every single month with thousands of troops. There's a missile defense system that's been set up in Romania to shoot missiles out of the sky that Putin's made the point with a small software change can be converted into missile launchers to launch missiles into Russia that could reach them in 5 to 10 minutes. Within 2 years there's going to be a missile system like that set up in Poland, which Putin has made clear that they will respond to this, and they are responding right now. And what you have is, although Obama advocates the reduction of the nuclear arsenal, he's been the president who's reduced them the least since the JFK administration. That's 50 or more years ago. He's actually invested $1 trillion between now and 2030 into modernizing America's nuclear arsenal, making the blast radius and the radioactive fallout of the bombs less, putting tail wings on the bombs to make them more precise, in the idea that you could have and win a limited nuclear war. Now that's completely insane. A limited nuclear war is not a concept that actually exists. They say that this is all being done to protect the Balkans and Eastern Europe from so-called Russian aggression. And obviously we know this is not true. Russia is actually playing a positive role in changing the world for the better. But just think about it. If Russia was actually going to invade Europe, they've been saying this since 2014. Are they really going to wait for a massive buildup of NATO to defend? If Russia would have invaded, they would have done it already. So this is a complete fairy tale that they're telling. There's no way that's going to happen. This is a complete provocation. And at the same time, you have a military buildup in the South China Sea. Now, Ashton Carter, the Defense Secretary of the United States, gave a speech recently at the U.S. Naval Commencement class, which I'd like to read just an excerpt of what he's saying so we have a sense of what's going on in that area. So he says that China is taking expansive and unprecedented actions in the South China Sea, pressing excessive maritime claims contrary to international law. What's new and unique to this region is the assertion of claims, dredging, land reclamation, and militarization of features by several claimants, but overwhelmingly by China. China's cyber actors have violated the spirit of the internet, not to mention the law, to perpetrate large-scale intellectual property theft from American companies. Instead of working toward what they call win-win cooperation that Beijing publicly says it wants, China sometimes plays by its own rules, undercutting those principles. A model like that is out of step with where the region wants to go, and it's counterproductive. It's far from a win-win. The result is that China's actions could erect a great wall of self-isolation as countries across the region, allies, partners, and the unaligned are voicing concerns publicly and privately at the highest level in regional meetings and global fora. And then he goes on to threaten, here it says, the use of U.S. weapon systems, the F-35, the P-8 stealth destroyer. He says, the DoD maintains world-leading capabilities because we have made incomparable investments over decades. It will take decades more for anyone to build the kind of military capability the United States possesses today. This strength is not simply about dollar figures, it's also about harnessing those dollars to a tremendous innovative and technological culture that only the United States has, and doing so to develop revolutionary technologies. So this is a massive provocation against China. China hasn't militarized the South China Sea at all. And frankly, it seems like, Ashton Carter's on LSD or something, because he might as well be talking about what the United States is doing in the South China Sea. They're the ones that are militarizing it. They're the ones that are provoking China. And all of the so-called US allies are having high-level discussions with China about, what the United States is doing. So, again, what we're really dealing with is people like Obama, people like Carter are provoking Russia, China, to have a war that could very well lead to the extermination of mankind on behalf of a financial oligarchy that's centered mainly in London with their junior partners in Wall Street. This is an oligarchy that's so completely bankrupt, they're trying to keep their system together for, a few more hours, a few more days, a few more weeks at best, by printing money, having negative interest rates, imposing massive austerity and cuts to public spending, bail-ins, and they have this absolutely genius, stunningly creative, like I can't believe no one's thought of it before, idea of throwing money out of helicopters to stimulate the economy. Let's give them a round of applause.
Such a genius.
So that's not going to work. This system is coming down. And can this danger of war, can this danger of collapse, can it be avoided? Absolutely, yes. And I think it largely depends upon the actions of the people in this room today, the people listening, and our partners all across the world. But to understand how we can actually win, we do have to do a little digging into history, mainly looking at the solutions that have been put on the table by this organization and principally Lyndon LaRouche. So I think we have here on our website, if you go to the About section and click on New Economic Order, that's this page. And it goes through Lynn's track record, or what this organization has done over 40 years. And I can't go through all of it in this presentation, but I think we should start right at the start in 1975, where Lynn actually forecasts the complete and final bankruptcy of the IMF. That this system that we're living in has a built-in function of collapse that's unavoidable. And in so forecasting this, he says that we need a completely new economic system. And he lays out this policy here for the International Development Bank that would issue low-interest, long-term credit to all the underdeveloped nations of the planet. And actually there was a fight to get the United States to join this bank. And if you've looked into the Hamiltonian credit system or the American system, how this country over 100 years became such a powerhouse in manufacturing and productivity, it's that kind of model, those kinds of ideas that Lynn is talking about spreading all over the globe, so that you can actually help countries in Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, Asia develop. And so he predicts that the IMF would go bankrupt. And you might ask, why is he focusing so much on the underdeveloped countries of the planet, even back then? Why help Africa? Why not talk about the United States? Well, look at those areas today. In the Middle East and North Africa are so underdeveloped, people might say this is a refugee crisis, but no, we're dealing with a mass migration from the Middle East, from North Africa. You can even look at the regions in Latin America. They're all fleeing their countries because there's no opportunity there anymore. They have, they can either join a terrorist army, flee, or pretty much die. And so there's a critical importance for developing all the regions of the world. Now this idea for the International Development Bank was taken up by the non-aligned movement and actually signed by all the member states. The non-aligned movement were pretty much the countries who were either, they were neutral, not with the Soviet Union, not with the United States. And so they all signed this, and Fred Wills, who was the foreign minister of Guyana, presented this on September 27th, was it 1976, to the United States General Assembly.
The United Nations.
Yeah, the United Nations, sorry. What did I say, United States? The United Nations General Assembly on September 27th, 1976. And here's just a little quote from what he said. He said, "There can be no meaningful economic advance without the implementation of the new international economic order," which over the next, 4 decades even, our organization has been fighting for. And what had happened, why a new international economic order, was because after World War II, because of the death of Roosevelt, it was the British Empire who set the agenda for the post-war period. And they used what was created, the IMF, the World Bank, and other related institutions, to keep countries enslaved, indebted, looted, and ultimately destroyed. And this is what we aim to reverse. So over the next decade, Lynn, using the platform as the presidential candidate in the United States, was working with world leaders like Indira Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister of India and the head of the non-aligned movement, Lopez Portillo, the President of Mexico, under something called Operation Juarez, which was a development plan, but it was also to get Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil to renege on their debt to the IMF, which was usurious in its nature, and basically, destroy the system and go with the new economic order. He also worked with Ronald Reagan on collaboration with the Soviet Union to end the Cold War. And that's another story that's, maybe you can look into another time.
There's a great 20-minute video that was done on that story on the website, which people can check out.
And we can send out the link afterwards. But there's a lot of work that we were doing because that's us, right? Now, this was all as a way to stop the danger of world war with the Soviet Union around what's called the Strategic Defense Initiative. But what happened? Well, Lynn was sent to prison. Indira Gandhi was assassinated. Lopez Portillo was ousted. And there was an assassination attempt on Reagan. And that's just scratching the surface. And luckily, Bill Clinton was the one who let Lynn out of prison. And I think this is where the part of the story that we're living really starts, with the issuing of our report in 1997.
You got a ways to go.
I know.
Just Control F. Control F 1997.
Well, we're almost there.
Well, it's good, we can see all the different.
I guess on some
Yeah,
subliminal,
it's nice.
some
You
subliminal
can
level,
see
we're.
that I'm skipping a whole lot of stuff, so this is really worth reading. But here's the report. You guys might have seen it. It was created, or the development of it started after the fall of the Berlin Wall, around the idea of a productive triangle between Paris, Vienna, and Berlin, and the creation of a Eurasian land bridge to integrate the destroyed economies of Russia and the former Soviet Union, and create one Eurasian land bridge based on new principles of cooperation. And what happened at that time was that Helga, Lynn's wife, was in China for conferences around these ideas. Lynn went to Russia to present these ideas, and they were working all over the world around this idea of creating this Eurasian land bridge, now what we call the world land bridge. It's not that the next decades were very, very bright. I mean, ultimately, Bill Clinton was severely weakened with these impeachment proceedings, and Glass-Steagall was removed, which essentially gave a lot of control over the economy to private Wall Street bankers. And then we had the Bush and Obama era, which basically brought in a police state and a policy of permanent warfare. We're not going to touch too much on that, but it's important to say that Lin actually warned about a terrorist attack at the beginning of 2001. He forecast this very publicly. And everything that's going on today, he basically lays it out in a 1999 documentary called Storm Over Asia, which even if you've seen it twice, it's still worth rewatching because it really does explain what's going on today. But that does bring us to today and how we can win. Lin has consistently mentioned the strategic importance of Vladimir Putin and how he's been able to outflank the British Empire at every step. And I think that there's three important events that have really been a big flanking move on the part of Putin and also his allies in China. The first one, scroll down. So again, I'm skipping through a whole lot, moving to 2013.
Second video cassette from the 90s.
I may have actually passed it.
If you just press Control F, you find whatever keyword associated with it.
He's got it. He's in 2013. Down. Down.
Right there. So in 2013, on September 7th, in a trip to Kazakhstan, the president of China, Xi Jinping, announced the One Belt, One Road policy, which is something that we've been advocating for a long time. They're basically adopting the ideas set forth in everything that we've fought for since that 1975 period. And let's take a look at what he said. He says, to forge closer economic ties, deepen cooperation, and expand development in the Euro-Asia region, we should take an innovative approach and jointly build an economic belt along the Silk Road. This will be a great undertaking, benefiting the people of all countries along the route. We must expand the development of Eurasia, creating an economic belt along the Silk Road. China and the Central Asian countries are at a crucial stage. We need a broader vision for cooperation. The peoples of this ancient Silk Road together can compose a wonderful new chapter in the much-told story. Now is a golden opportunity for development. So you can see clearly in what their intentions are. And if you contrast that with what we saw at the beginning of Obama's speech, you're already seeing a very big difference in how these people think. Now the next flanking operation, I would say, is in 2014 at a meeting in Fortaleza, Brazil. Where the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, actually launch a new banking system and create tens and dozens of economic agreements, and they're actually moving forward on implementing what Lin has been saying for the last 40 years. And their idea of a new development bank is actually modeled very closely on Lin's International Development Bank. It's based on the exact same principles. So here's what Putin said about this. We are united by desire to act from unified positions in all issues of global development and the formation of the global financial and economic architecture. We have been able to achieve significant successes. I want to stress that all the plans we set for ourselves a year ago have come to fruition. I am referring first and foremost to our plans to create a new development bank and a currency reserve pool for BRICS nations. Today, we have confirmed their founding documents. The BRICS Bank will become one of the largest multilateral financial development institutions in the world. Its stated capital will be $100 billion. The scale of possible operations within the framework of the currency reserve pool may also reach $100 billion. This mechanism creates the prerequisites for effectively protecting our countries from financial market crisis. The bank and the currency pool, with combined resources of $200 billion, lay the foundation for coordinating a macroeconomic policy between our nations. So anybody who knows anything about banking knows that $200 billion in capital can be leveraged out into several trillions of dollars of credit. So this is some of the banks that they're using to now finance the new Silk Road and all these other projects that obviously we know of. Now the last big flanking operation is what Putin did in 2015 in moving into Syria, where he basically goes on to say that they're putting an end to this whole policy of regime change and illegal war, and that they're going after the empire's terrorist apparatus. And this has completely weakened the British Empire. It's exposed that countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia, the British, Obama, are really what are backing up these terrorists. Obviously, if you were paying attention, you could have known that long before he did that. Obviously, our challenge is going to be having other people realize what's happening. But this is sort of where we're at. And the effects of those three moves and what happened in between, the effects of that is that today you have Japan that's changing, or seems to be changing, their position in the world. Actually, after Obama gave his speech, Obama was scolded by Abe because you have these military bases, especially in Okinawa, where American soldiers have been caught multiple times raping and even killing Japanese women. And that's all Abe wanted to talk about. And you can see they do have to be somewhat diplomatic in their speeches. Obama doesn't come out saying, hey, we're going to kill thousands of people. But he does say that if you can read between his words. So what is Abe really saying here? He also was the only one at the recent G7 meeting who warned that the world economy is collapsing. Even though everybody else said, oh, the economy is doing fine, every country can do what they want, we'll just throw some money from helicopters, things are great. And actually, Abe invested this is what they're doing, $90 billion into maglev trains. These trains that levitate with huge superconducting magnets that can go 400 kilometers per hour. So there's a clear intention there, especially given that Abe visited Putin in March against the wishes of Obama. You also have a new Philippine president who's coming in on June 30th, who's been saying, he actually wrote a letter to the president of China congratulating him on what a great president he is. So there's a shift going on in the Philippines as well. And now we're learning from Germany that there's going to be protests in the month of June and July against these nuclear weapons being stationed there.
Oh, there you go.
There's also, this week, there was a breakthrough in German media where the truth about 9/11 was coming out there. So I think that we're in a great position. I think victory can be achieved, but we still have that one big problem of Obama that's in the White House with his finger on the button. So that's to be kept in mind, and that's what our mission should be, to get him out and to move the United States, Canada, and Europe into this new economic order. Thank you guys for coming out so early to this symposium of great ideas. It's going to be my duty to put what we're going to be learning today in its proper political context. Obviously, there's a lot going on. Some of it is catastrophic, but some of it is very hopeful. So I wanted to start today by just showing an excerpt of Obama's speech that he gave when he went to visit Hiroshima. He was actually the first president to visit Hiroshima, and he did not apologize. So just this short excerpt, I want you to just pay attention to what Obama thinks about humanity throughout its history.
71 years
Louder?
ago, a bright, cloudless morning, death fell from the sky, and the world was changed. A flash of light, a wall of fire, destroyed a city. Demonstrated that mankind possessed the means to destroy itself. Why do we come to this place? To Hiroshima. We come to ponder the terrible force unleashed in the not-so-distant past. We come to mourn the dead, including over 100,000 Japanese men, women, and children. Thousands of Koreans. And yet, the war brought the same basic instinct for domination and conquest that caused conflicts among the simplest tribes. No pattern, amplified by new capabilities, and without new constraints. In the span of a few years, some 60 million people were dying. Men, women, children. No different than us. Shot, beat, marched, bombed, jailed, starved, gassed to death. Many sites around the world, the hunger for gold, held by nationalist fervor or religious zeal. Empires have risen and fallen. Peoples have been subjugated and liberated. And at each junction, innocents have suffered. And countless told. The names forgotten by time. The World War that reached its brutal end in Hiroshima and Nagasaki spawned among the wealthiest and most powerful of nations. Their civilizations have given the world great cities, magnificent art. Their thinkers had advanced ideas of justice, and harmony, and truth, and thus Americans more free. Their souls speak to them. They ask us to forgive them. They stop before we are. And what we might become. It is not the fact of war that sets Hiroshima apart. Artifacts tell us that the violent conflict appeared with the very first man. Our early ancestors, having learned to make blades from flint and spears from wood, used these tools not just for hunting, but against their own kind. On every continent, the history of civilization is filled with war.